I'd love to start this with you just telling your story, because you come from a place that is so vastly different than what our audience would expect. And you've ended up here where our audience would expect. And it's a wild story.
It's crazy. Yeah. And, people can check out the TED Talk, and it's, 11 minutes of a version of my life story, which is basically, so I'm from San Francisco originally. I grew up in the big city. I didn't grow up with nature being a big part of my life. And, hunting was as far from my radar. Like, I don't think I ever met a hunter. I didn't know anything. Everything I learned about hunting, I learned from watching Bambi. So when I was a teenager, I met some people who were doing some anti-fur animal rights activist stuff. And, I love animals. I grew up with dogs and, just always wanted to spend time outside with animals. I wanted to be the nature nerd that I am now. I just didn't know it yet. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't believe people are doing these horrible things to animals. How can I help? I'm very eager to try to improve their lives. And it was kind of just from there, I learned about factory farming and became a vegetarian. And there was a short period there before I became vegan. And I went all into the vegan animal rights activist lifestyle. I worked for full-time for an international animal rights nonprofit. I was one of the more hardcore animal rights activists and vegans you would ever find. So, and yet here I am talking to you.
So you were an ethical vegan, would you say?
Yeah, the main concern I had, or main decision behind going vegan, was because I just wanted animals to be treated well. Mm-hmm. And everything I saw didn't provide any way to use animal products that I felt comfortable with. And a lot of that was just because I didn't see very many things aside from factory farming. And, I didn't have a lot of experience with wilderness and animals. So I'm coming from this really limited perspective, and then being told that, people are doing these terrible things to animals. Well, the obvious choice was for me to stop participating in these industries that made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we know what we know. We know what we're exposed to. And, like how old were you when this was happening? When you were like, I'm diving headlong into this lifestyle?
I was young. So I think I went vegetarian when I was 13, and I was full vegan by the time I was 16.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what happened?
Well, time passes and you learn things. And, I went to college, and, it's such a long transition, but I'll try to keep it as concise as possible for the audience here. But I studied journalism while I was in college. I was a radio host, and I try to, of course, kind of get my agenda in whenever I could. If somebody had a story about animal rights or something, I would always try to help, bring it in and cover it. And some friends of mine who worked for a nonprofit animal rights group knew this lady who had rescued a bunch of factory farmed hens. And so they were egg-laying chickens. She took them all in, had them in her backyard. There was a nonprofit who helped her get them. But once she had those birds in her care, they were kind of like, all right, they're yours now, hands off. And so we ended up chatting. I was like, well, let me get your story on the air, and we'll talk about factory farming. We'll talk about your experience rehabilitating these birds. And she was a super nice lady. And it turns out she, the medical care for these birds was pretty expensive. They all had some kind of underlying diseases, and, just a lifetime of being kept in a pretty small cage. They're not doing so hot. And so she ended up with also all these eggs, because, she's got a bunch of these birds. They're bred to lay eggs almost every day. So she's got all these eggs piling up. She's got medical bills piling up. Well, what's she going to do? Like, she started selling the eggs at the farmer's market, and her sign at the farmer's market actually said vegan eggs. She would try to get everybody's attention because, her market was perfect for vegans. It's like, this is the most ethical egg. It's not just, humanely raised. You're actually improving the lives of these animals, because you're giving them medical care. You're giving them a better life. You're giving them free range. They're basically, got a cushy retirement. and the byproduct is eggs, and she needs money. So it just made sense for her to start selling them. And, I passed by her booth at the farmer's market pretty much every week when I was, living around there. And eventually I was like, like she deserves support. Yeah, how bad could it be to buy these eggs? I haven't had an egg in years. And so I ended up buying a dozen eggs from her. I think they were like $10 too, like the most expensive eggs you could buy. But hey, it's a donation to the vet bills, right? So I get home, I like have these eggs sitting on the counter for probably, 5 days before I figure out what to do with them. I was like, all right, I'm going to scramble these eggs. I'm going to eat them. I made the commitment to buy them. Why not? And I cooked those eggs so long that I can't imagine eating that. Like whatever I ate was probably the worst you could ever have in an egg. Probably so sad. But I did. I finally ate them, and I was like, you know what? This feels fine. Like I'm examining my own ethics here. I didn't do anything that I didn't agree with, and so I started buying her eggs pretty regularly. I was like, I'm learning to cook an egg, in my 20s, as you do, and it just kind of cracked the door open a little bit. Because why was I vegan? Because I don't want animals to be mistreated. Well, if these animals, I know the person who's raising these birds, I know why she has them, and that they're, she's doing good by them. This doesn't go against my ethics. But when you have something like veganism, it makes a really complex issue really black and white. And I always thought, animal products bad, no animal products good. And if you can just simplify your mind like that, it makes your life really easy. Our brains are lazy. They want to have easy answers. And if you can just say, oh, this whole category of things is off limits, it's easier mentally than to say, okay, but what about this in the gray area? Technically it doesn't violate my ethics.
Yeah. Well, and what it provides is a platform for you to believe you're right. And the people who aren't agree, or, who don't live that lifestyle are wrong. And like you said, yeah, it simplifies it, and it allows you sort of an intellectual out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, our brains are lazy. They want to make quick choices. And like just having that experience, even though I knew, if you'd asked me in great detail and grilled me on it, I would have probably conceded that, yes, it's possible to have a humanely raised egg, but I, will not partake. Well, here I was in a situation where I got myself into the gray area, and that kind of leads you to now think, okay, well, if I can have eggs that are raised in a way I feel good about, what is this humane meat stuff about? Like, how can I feel comfortable eating, say, bacon? Can I buy a steak and feel like that animal lived a good enough life where I'm not, going against my personal core values in order to eat it? Well, here I am. I clearly made some changes, but it took a really long time.